Welcome, Commander players. This is Jumbo Commander, and we have another Commander deck tech from Commander 2016. It's Breya Etherium Shaper. Breya Etherium Shaper. White, blue, black, red for a 4/4 legendary artifact creature human. I love that she's an artifact creature, and she looks like it too. That art is spectacular. I love the lightning and the sort of evil look she has. I think this art is excellent. When Breya Etherium Shaper enters the battlefield, make 2 1/1 blue Thopters with flying. Okay. You can also pay 2 and sacrifice 2 artifacts to choose one. She deals 3 damage to a player, a creature gets -4/-4, or you gain 5 life. Now, Breya is filled with value. 4 CMC, 4/4, make 2 Thopters? Yeah! And she has an activated ability. The problem is that this is an underwhelming activated ability, and a lot of people are like, ho-hum about her. 2 mana, sacrifice 2 artifacts to Lightning Bolt? To gain 5 life? They are a little bit underwhelming, but I have to convince you that she is perfect. Mostly because of this color identity. The white, blue, black, red. We have not had this before. I have a 5-color artifact-based commander deck that just doesn't play green. I just never play the commander. And it's a great deck. It's fun and interesting, and I'm going to explain it to you in great detail coming up. But now, I have a commander that can really be at the helm of this deck. And she actually has synergy with some of the deck. She creates artifacts, and she has a sacrifice outlet on her. And a sacrifice outlet that can deal damage to a player. I mean, Breya can go infinite with some cards in this deck. I think she's a great commander, and I'm excited to explore how she can open up this deck and really be the commander we want her to be. So like I mentioned, this deck has artifacts. It has a bunch of combos, some synergies. It's got a lot of value in it. I just took all my favorite artifact colored cards and jammed them together in one really fun to play deck. So let me go ahead and share that with you. The first thing you need is some artifact mana. Specifically, you need the artifact lands. They're going to be your land drops and your artifacts. Remember, they're fetchable by Trinket Mage, they're sacrificable by your commander. They're just great to have. Also, these 0 mana cost artifacts are great land replacements. So we're actually running a lot of artifact lands. You can't see me, but I put quotation marks around lands. These are like lands. Inventor's Fair is the newest legendary land from Kaladesh that is great in artifact decks. It gives you incidental life gain, which I really like, but then also can find you the artifact card you need to, control the game or combo off. Glimmer Void is just another command tower. Ashnod's Altar and Kark Clan Ironworks are very important. What they are is they're both sacrifice outlets. Ashnod's Altar, sacrifice a creature. The Ironworks is sacrifice an artifact. But this is instant speed, just sacrifice to gain 2 colorless mana. This is going to be really important for a lot of combos that we have. So remember in the back of your head, we have sources in our deck that generate 2 mana when we sacrifice something. Here are these artifact synergies. So in this section, I'm going to be explaining a lot of synergies, and it's important to remember those Ironworks, that altar in the back of your head, but also these cards, because these cards are going to synergize with things going to the graveyard. Bitter Ordeal, 2 and a black. Search target player's library for a card and remove that card from the game. Gravestorm. Now, Gravestorm is only found on this one card, and it's Storm for the graveyard. Basically, you can copy Bitter Ordeal and choose new targets for it for every permanent that hit the graveyard this turn. This is also very similar to Disciple of the Vault, which is going to drain your opponent every time an artifact is put in the graveyard from play. So if you can just churn through artifacts, like artifact from the battlefield to graveyard, battlefield to graveyard, battlefield to graveyard, if you loop them in some way or just keep sacking things, you can just win the game with Bitter Ordeal exiling every card in your opponent's library, or Disciple of the Vault just draining people. Not to mention Marionette Master, who can drain people for 4 every time an artifact enters the graveyard. Man, with a drain of 4, you might not even need to go infinite. You could maybe just drain someone out with your commander. Hey, I'm going to sacrifice 2 things. That's going to deal 3 damage to you and drain you for 8. Ugh. Just 2 mana, 11 damage at the cost of 2 artifacts could be backbreaking. So remember these cards, because every time I say, well, it goes to the graveyard and comes back again, think, oh my gosh, what happens if there's a Disciple of the Vault on the battlefield? What happens if there's a Marionette Master on the battlefield? Because these cards synergize beautifully with the rest of the deck. Another option is Scrap Heap. If you want to gain infinite life, I don't want to gain infinite life. I want to exile your library, and I want to drain you out like the puppet master I am. Alright, let's start off with a synergy that works with our commander and another very interesting and broken card called Nim Deathmantle. This 2-mana equipment buffs a guy, but whatever. It also says whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you can pay 4. If you do, return that card to the battlefield and attach Nim Deathmantle to it. So you remember those artifacts, Ashnod's Altar, the Kirkland Ironworks, that generate mana when we sacrifice creatures and artifacts. So if we were to say, I don't know, play a Mere Battlesphere, get some mana from a few of its Murs, and then sacrifice the Battlesphere itself. Well, we just pay 4 and boom, we get the Battlesphere back with Nim Deathmantle attached to it. And it generates 4 more Murs. That's a lot of Murs and a lot of mana. Again, sacrifice a Mur, sacrifice the Battlesphere, generate 4 mana, boom, get it back with the Deathmantle again. Over and over and over again. This will get us infinite Murs, infinite mana, and if we have one of those cards that I mentioned earlier, like the Bitter Ordeal, we can just win on the spot. We don't have to wait for Mur Battlesphere to attack with, 22,000 Murs. We can do something similar with Wormcoil Engine as well. And our own General, actually. Our General still produces 2 blue Thopter artifact creature tokens. So again, sacrifice one of the Thopters, sacrifice Brea herself, make sure she goes to the graveyard, no replacement effect there, and then trigger the Deathmantle, get her back again, produce more Thopters, and do it over and over and over again. And one of the great things is that she's in your command zone. So you always have access to Brea, and she has a win condition built into her. With infinite mana and infinite Thopters, you can just use this sacrifice 2 artifacts ability, deal 3 damage to target player. You can just gain infinite life, wipe the board with infinite -4/-4s, and then deal 3 damage infinite number of times to all of your opponents. So this is a great combo that can exist in your command zone and also be really powerful with cards that I want to play anyways. Some of the next powerful synergies with a notorious commander, Sharoom the Hegemon. 3 white, blue, black for a 5/5 legendary artifact, Sphinx. When this flying monster enters the battlefield, you can return an artifact card from your graveyard straight to the battlefield. Now that ability is great in this deck alone. We would love to get stuff from our graveyard back off the battlefield. That's just great. But Sharoom has the added benefit of being a combo piece with something as simple as Sculpting Steel. We actually want Sculpting Steel in this deck too. I want 2 Mana Vaults, I want 2 Soul Rings, I want 2 Sharooms. Oh, wait a second. That's where the combo comes into play. Let's figure it out. Let's say Sharoom's on the battlefield and we bring Sculpting Steel back from the graveyard. Great. Sculpting Steel enters and we say, hey, I want 2 Sharooms. So Sculpting Steel copies the other Sharoom. As soon as it copies it, it gets the ETB trigger. Bing, gets something back from the graveyard. But wait, state-based effects say, no, you cannot have 2 legendary artifact creatures of the same name on the battlefield at the same time. Fix it. So okay, you fix it. You get rid of Shroom, and now you have a sculpting steel that is copied Shroom, and it has Shroom's ETB, which says get something back from the graveyard. Well, let's resolve that by getting back the Shroom, and then it starts all over again. Now wait a second, what we've done is we've set up a horrible loop of Shroom going from the graveyard to the battlefield and back again, over and over and over again. Why does that matter? Oh, it's the Disciple of the Vault, it's the bitter ordeal. We gain value by things going in and out of the battlefield. From the battlefield into the graveyard and back again, we can just drain out our entire opponent's life. Oh yeah, there's also Phyrexian Metamorph. Alright, the combos are going to get a little bit trickier because we have Nuisance Engine. Notice it's 2 and tap to create a little pest. This one's tap to put a 2/2 colorless pincher token onto the battlefield. And when an artifact is put into a graveyard from play, you may untap Summoning Station. These are all dealing with tapping. Notice a lot of the other ones didn't have tapping involved, and so these become a little bit more complicated to pull off, along with Prototype Portal. I'll explain a lot of how these guys work. Basically what you'll need is you'll need something to untap them, and Draw Scorpion does a good job. Draw Scorpion says, whenever Draw Scorpion or another artifact creature is put into the graveyard from play, you may untap target artifact. So if you can imagine Prototype Portal popping out something like a Myr Battlesphere or, a lot of artifacts, you can sacrifice them to gain some mana. The Draw Scorpion goes, aha, untap something, and then you can untap the portal, then sink the mana into it to create the item again. This is much easier with something like Summoning Station, where if something goes to the graveyard, it untaps on its own. You can also use something like Clock of Omens if you're producing multiple tokens, like multiple Myrs. You tap those Myrs, maybe you untap Prototype Portal, sacrifice a few of them as well, and then you can produce another Myr Battlesphere. These cards have so much synergy together, it's hard to explain how each one interacts with all the other. When playing this deck, it's so much fun because you can just put cards on the battlefield and figure them out like a big puzzle that somehow you have this 8-card combo and it's super powerful. That's why I love playing this deck. Let's get to a few simpler synergies, like Thopter Foundry and Sword of the Meek, now recently unbanned in Modern, but does not seem to be played. Anyway, with this combo, you can pay 1 and sacrifice a non-token artifact. That's the Sword of the Meek. Okay? And then that will put a 1/1 blue Thopter creature token with flying on the battlefield and gain you a life. Alright, as soon as that Thopter goes chink onto the battlefield, then the sword goes, hey, I'm going to attach myself to it. And the sword comes back, attached to the Thopter, which lets you pay 1 mana and sacrifice the sword to do it all over again. So the result of this is, every 1 mana gets you a Thopter, gains you a life, and also sends a sword to the graveyard, which could give us a lot of triggers for some of those cards that we know about. Time Sieve is just a cool card. Tap and sacrifice 5 artifacts, take an extra turn after this one. We might just be able to, through all of our crazy synergies getting things back and forth again, just go off with Time Sieve without Thopter Assembly. But Thopter Assembly certainly makes it easier. 6 mana for a flying Thopter, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control no Thopters other than Thopter Assembly, return Thopter Assembly to its owner's hand and put 5 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. So this generates Thopters for your every turn that you can sacrifice to gain more and more turns, locking out the game. Yeah, it sucks for your opponents, but yeah. Just make sure you don't play your general, and then Thopter Assembly doesn't trigger, and then you're just sad. Card manipulation. We have all these synergies, all these combos, all these artifacts. How are we going to move cards around in this deck? The best way to draw cards is on an artifact, and Memory Jar is amazing. It does exactly what you want in this deck. It draws you 7 new cards, an explosive hand to play out, It's an artifact that you can recur to get more and more card advantage, and when you're done, you just throw the cards in your graveyard, which turns out to be a great resource when it comes to artifact decks. Wheel of Fortune is great too, but it really doesn't compare to the Memory Jar. So we want to be able to churn through our deck, get cards from our hand into our graveyard, and keep digging deeper. So Cathartic Reunion lets us throw some cards in the graveyard, which could be relevant, and then draw 3 more. Faithless Looting costs 1 red to just churn through 2 more cards and then flash it back later to get even more looks at cards. Thirst for Knowledge actually gains us card advantage. Oh, imagine that. And Fact or Fiction is incredibly powerful. Can give us a ton of card advantage and let us choose what goes into the graveyard and what we're taking into our hand. We want to get just the right artifacts onto the battlefield and just the right artifacts into our graveyard, so let's use Kadotha Forgemaster, Reshape, and Transmute Artifact to sacrifice what we don't need and get what we do right onto the battlefield. Cards that we want to sacrifice are like Ichor Wellspring and Microsynth Wellspring. Also those artifact lands, anything that's useless, something we want to get back from the graveyard. We have tons of options. Arkham Dagson is a little bit more limiting in what you can sacrifice and search for. You have to sacrifice an artifact creature and then get a non-creature artifact. But we're going to have Thopters from our general that we can sacrifice very easily, and there are a lot of non-creature artifacts we want on the battlefield. Master Transmuter does something pretty similar where we can return an artifact to our hand and put an artifact from our hand onto the battlefield. So we can return that Ichor Wellspring that we don't really want on the battlefield, or that land, and then drop something huge. Tezzeret the Seeker is no slouch. His -X to get exactly what you want onto the battlefield is very powerful. And also his +1 being able to untap up to 2 artifacts can give you mana ramp if you're untapping mana rocks, or can let you kinda go off with some of those tap-untap cards that I mentioned earlier in the synergies section. Tezzeret the Seeker is far better than his other form, Tezzeret Agent of Bolus, but he's worth a mention. Look at the top 5 cards of your library and then get an artifact and put it into your hand. That is a very powerful ability, and so this kind of card draw is not something you should take lightly. His -1 of turning it into a 5/5 is fine, but we're not going to beat people down with this deck. We're going to win with our awesome synergies. Now, I've been mentioning tutors like Reshape and Venser, but let's talk about the original tutor. How about Demonic Tutor? In a deck that has limited board wipes, limited control elements, we need some tutors to help control the board, because things can get out of hand while we're doing shenanigans with Thopters. But I prefer Intuition if I'm getting artifacts, because I often want some of my artifacts in the graveyard. We can get tons of value by just throwing some artifacts in the graveyard, and if we happen to end up with one in our hand, great. Intuition's like a double Intune. Enlightened Tutor can set up our next draw, and Muddle the Mixture is a search for CMC2. There's a lot of cards that have CMC2 that we need in this combo. Nim Deathmantle is one of them, Time Sieve is one, the whole Thopter Sword of the Meek combo is another one, and not to mention, counter target instant or sorcery spell is the defense that we need in a deck like this. Dak Faden will churn through your deck, letting you draw and discard cards, not to mention gaining control of target artifact. I love that ability. Dak Faden is wonderful. And here is an unsung hero, a star of the deck that's in the 99, Daretti Scrap Savant. 4 mana for this 3 loyalty Planeswalker, and we can loot with him. Great. But sacrifice an artifact if you do return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is why we want some cards in our graveyard. We've got cards like Daretti to switch artifacts around. We have cards like Sharoom that gets them right back onto the battlefield. We have cards like Goblin Welder, which can just weld an artifact from your graveyard, boom, straight into play. These effects are very powerful and very fun. as long as we're talking about welder effects, why don't we take it up a notch with Scrap Mastery? This is Living Death for artifacts. 3 red, each player exiles all artifacts cards from his or her graveyard, sacrifices all the artifacts they control, and then puts all the artifact cards from their graveyard onto the battlefield. This is a very powerful and cool effect, and remember, your commander has a sacrifice outlet on her. So you can spend a turn sacrificing all your key artifacts, pray to Heliod that you do not get your graveyard removed from the game, and then Scrap Mastery everything back. It's very fun. You guys should try it. Flexibility. We have a lot of combos, we have a lot of card draw, we have a lot of manipulation of the deck. We need a little bit of flexibility to make sure that this deck doesn't just fall right on its face. How about some Flash with Shimmermer and Vidalcan Orrery? How about some board wipes with All Is Dust and Ugin the Spirit Dragon? I like All Is Dust because you have to sacrifice them and then they'll go into your graveyard. That's pretty good, especially against Indestructible. Ugin does exile your stuff. I really like my things to go to my graveyard rather than be exiled, but I'm going to be okay because Ugin's going to get me out of some jams. Let's protect our artifacts with a little bit of indestructibility from Darksteel Forge. And if indestructibility isn't good enough, let's go with Hexproof. Padim, Council of Innovation. I actually haven't had a chance to play with Padim. My deck that I had built is a little bit older, and Padim's a brand new card, and I'm really excited to see how she fits in. I also really want to see how often she draws cards. I'm really excited to see if she's a keeper in this deck. I think she's going to be. Oh, by the way, Navinral's Disc with Darksteel Forge is just gross. I mentioned a lot of cute synergies and combos and taking extra turns and throwing Thopters at people. You know, sometimes we might just want to put a fatty onto the battlefield. How about Blightsteel Colossus? Just Cadol the Forge Master him right onto the battlefield and just start swinging at people. I could get behind that. How about Magister Sphinx? Sometimes people get out of control. I have some people in my play group that can get to insane amounts of life, and sometimes you just need a Sphinx to put their life total to 10. That is my Breya Etherium Shaper. Awesome, artifact-based, synergy-filled, combo-tastic, white, blue, black, red commander deck. What do you guys think? Now, let me tell you what I think. I've played this deck a lot, and it's very fun, and I'm really excited to see how a few of these new cards fit in. I think they're going to be great. These artifact synergies is something we've loved to play with in the past, and I guarantee that you will find them interesting and powerful. It's like a beautifully built clock that all sort of fits together and runs like crazy until you drain someone out or exile their library. It's very powerful, but very enjoyable. This has been Jumbo Commander. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'm so excited that this commander came out. This actually created a bunch of stuff for the anticipation of an Is It Commander, including like this little screen right here and a bunch of other stuff. I like intricately cut out the racer guy and then was waiting for an Is It Commander so badly and it never came out. That's why I'm so excited that this one did come out and I can make this video and I can share with you all of the cool strategies and synergies that exist in this color combination. I'm so excited for this Commander 2016 and I hope you are too. Please subscribe so that you can get more and more videos about these new Commander releases. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.